Nestled between the sea and rolling hills is the graceful capital of South Australia, Adelaide. Going beyond the dot to this land of wide open spaces, deep blue sea, fresh seafood and fine wines, one Singaporean has found success pursuing the very things he loves. Join Singaporean winemaker, distributor and trade ambassador Ernie Goh as he goes about his daily work and play in the land down under. McLaren Vale boasts of an old wine tradition that dominated the region for over a century since the 1830s. And Ernie is the only Singaporean who has become part of that illustrious tradition. Ernie's romance with Australia's grapes started early when he was studying at the University of Adelaide in 1993. He's currently the proud owner of a wine distributing company and a winery that stretches over 88 acres of land, roughly the size of 45 soccer fields. This garden of vines produces 180,000 bottles of wine yearly. Ernie could not have chosen a better place to embark on his winemaking career, as South Australia is famous for the region's intensely flavoured wines that include labels such as Penfolds, Jacobs Creek, Peter Lehmann and Wolf Blass.
When I left Singapore, I finished my national service. I came here to study at the University of Adelaide. Just before I graduated, I came in touch with a family friend's contact. So we came to talk about this wine and Australian wines, and he said, look, why don't you look at the possibility of supplying boutique wines to us? So I started doing that out of interest, and slowly I learned a bit more and more about the wine industry, and that's how I started.
With only his passion to fuel him, Ernie learned about winemaking from scratch.
Working in a winery, you will learn so much more than actually reading about it. My knowledge of wines has always been self-taught. Actually, the whole industry and everyone is my teacher.
Ernie is not the type of boss who will sit in his air-conditioned office every day. Though majority of the harvesting and crushing of the grapes are now done by machinery, Ernie still enjoys being out in his vineyard and getting his hands dirty.
Owning a business here is very hands-on. Even if a small business like ours, we tend to try to do everything ourselves if we can. So by doing so many things, you learn from that as well. If I wanted to do anything to arrange a truck to pick up, I would tend to do a lot of it myself, or even little things. It's not like in Asia, where if you're the boss, like, hey, you do this, you do that, everything's done, all you need is a call.
From learning to savor wines to finally producing and distributing his own vintages, Ernie has become somewhat of a connoisseur in his own right. After the grapes are harvested, they are trucked off to the winery where they will be stemmed and crushed using modern machinery. Visitors hoping to experience the traditional method of crushing grapes by stepping, however, will have to wait for the region's wine festival for the customary demonstration. When it comes to the fine art of fermenting the grapes, Ernie turns to his partner and expert winemaker, Walter Clappis. Ernie's partnership with Walter goes back a long way, when they first met at one of Australia's racetracks 10 years ago. Winemaking is a delicate process that requires Walter's constant attention. Their meticulous attention has paid off, as their wines have achieved a distinction score of 98 on the International Parker Rating for wines. This near-perfect score reflects the extraordinary quality and complexity of Ernie's wines.
Every situation, every time you crush grapes, it's a different story to be told, and we have to handle each batch differently.
With his deep knowledge of grapes and experience, Walter instinctively knows when the must are ready for pressing and the clear wine transferred to wooden barrels for aging. Ernie's Australia Wine Company currently produces 6 different labels of wine, such as the Haddonist, Wilkinson Estate and Amicus. Patrolling the snaking lines of bottles, Ernie ensures that his vintage is properly bottled, sealed, labelled and packed for shipment. Ernie takes a personal responsibility for the quality of his wines, either in the growing of the grapes or the final presentation of the bottle. He oversees each step with the loving dedication of a proud father. South Australia is famous for its densely coloured and richly flavoured Shiraz. However, for Ernie and Walter, their taste for wines also includes other varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon, Grenache and Merlot.
We produce 3 fundamentally, which is Shiraz, Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. But we source Grenache from neighbouring vineyards and white varieties as well.
Among Australia's wine circle, 37-year-old Ernie is considered young for a winemaker. Yet his hard work and warm personality has earned him the respect of his peers.
Each of us has our job to do. I'm in charge of production, Ernie's in charge of marketing and PR, which is very good. He's also very well connected. He has lots and lots of contacts. He's very well respected. We went to a wine competition, you know, like an options game, and Ernie won that competition. So I was very impressed with him because
We were at the same table.
they were blind tasting wines from all over the world, and Ernie, he knew his wines. There was no doubt about it.
A short 50-minute flight from Adelaide lies the serene Port Lincoln, the seafood capital of Australia. Ernie is especially drawn towards Port Lincoln to indulge in the region's superb seafood, as well as to catch up with a few friends and business partners.
Besides working, we work hard here, but we also play hard. If I may say, I think we play harder than we work.
In addition to his wine business, Ernie also seeks to promote a vibrant export culture between Australia and Singapore through his work as president of the Australia-Singapore Business Council. Ernie sees the rich seafood at Port Lincoln as the ideal tempting delicacies that he can introduce to the Singapore gourmet food market. As part of his business survey and product assessment, it is only natural for Ernie to generously sample these juicy morsels.
Oh, which wine will go with a green lip abalone? Oh, nicely oaked Chardonnay, or a nice young Sauvignon Blanc. I think will be perfect. Beautiful. Okay.
He won't want to come, but that's a big one, isn't it?
Oh. Very strong lobster, ready for transport overseas. A nice Adelaide Hills Sauvignon Blanc would be very nice with the lobsters.
While at Port Lincoln, Ernie simply couldn't resist a quick trip to the beautiful, pristine waters of Coffin Bay. Oysters have a huge reputation here at Coffin Bay. Farmers come out here daily to the rows of oyster leases to harvest the juicy crop. And just like Ernie's grapes, they rely on the clean, natural environment to bring out the quality produce.
Oh, it's just the water's so clean. There's no other fresh water coming into it. It's all salt, concentrated salt. So if Brendan does crack you a few oysters, you can taste a bit of water and taste the oyster. It tastes exactly the same.
Ernie's gourmet adventure at Port Lincoln ends with a mouth-watering dinner with his friend Brian Turvey. Following Aussie's generous hospitality, the sumptuous dinner spread naturally included the region's famous and finest seafood. Coincidentally, Brian's family also owns a winery. Competition aside, Ernie is more than eager to exchange wine-producing experiences with Brian at this opportune occasion. Perhaps this is why Ernie feels he is living his dream, because his business is also his pleasure. Life in Australia seldom strays far from sports and the great outdoors. Like his Australian friends, Ernie has also developed an appreciation for South Australian horse racing, the Adelaide Cup. The racetrack is also where businessmen come to meet and mingle, for big festivals like this attract many product sponsors and potential clientele. Being an astute businessman himself, Ernie makes sure he is also part of the action. Though a foreigner, Ernie feels right at home amidst the exciting thundering hooves and wildly cheering crowd. He is rooting for his favorite horse, just like everyone else.
See, Australia is a very multicultural society. In Adelaide itself, we have so many cultures and so many different people living here, and we all live in harmony. It's very much like Singapore. It's a very metropolitan, very multicultural society, and we learn to tolerate and to live with each other's cultural differences and learn to accept as well. And I think there's as much harmony here as back in Singapore.
However, when Ernie first started his business in Australia, he found it hard to adjust to the different work culture here.
Perhaps the lifestyle, we got to learn how things are done here differently because there's a huge emphasis on balancing work and lifestyle. So it can get a bit frustrating sometimes if you want to get something done, but 5 p.m. everyone's gone home. The unions here in Australia, they are quite strong group, and if they want anything like pay rise or they feel that they are being unfairly treated, they can go on strike. For my business, it happened once over just towards Christmas when my clients want some wines, and because of the people at the ports, they go on strike. My shipments are all delayed, and you know you can't do anything about it. So these are some of the hurdles that you have to learn to overcome.
Ernie suffered losses, but he took it all in his stride, quickly bouncing back from this setback. Today, Ernie helps distribute over 30 South Australian wine labels to the UK, US, certain parts of Europe and Asia, including Singapore and China. After the excitement of the races, Ernie slows down to share a relaxing moment with his business acquaintances, who have also become his good friends in life. Gathered here are his buddies that he first got to know from the Australia-Singapore Business Council. As a reflection of the multicultural community here in Adelaide, the gang includes Singaporeans, Malaysians and Australians. So, even if Ernie lives alone in Adelaide, his life is never dull or lonely.
I would say it would be at least once every couple of weeks. In-house, in somebody's house, maybe once every 3-4 weeks. Outside restaurants, much more often, maybe a few times a week.
This wine is the best wine that any Singaporean has ever produced.
The thing is, deep-rootedness in food, Even that, how many years have you been here? 14 years. Still he chases his food, you see. Go where he follows his nose, you see, where the Singaporean food, where the food is.
Indeed, Ernie has a very personal approach when it comes to food and wine.
I believe that what you like to drink and what you like to eat that goes together is based on individual preferences. If you like it, there's no one to tell you, hey, you're doing it the wrong way.
Ernie's easygoing personality makes him a great company to have at any party. Contrary to criticism of racism, Ernie feels quite welcomed in Australia as well.
The people here are very easily approachable. There's not a lot of arrogance, if I may say so. Australians are very easy people to do business with, and what they say or what they show is what they are. Very little pretenses or arrogance about what they are or what they're doing. Yeah.
Ernie's Singaporean roots and Australian training also makes him a unique person.
I think it's coming from Singapore and having lived here, I try to marry these two to make the best out of both worlds. So I think that has helped me personally in terms of growing as a person as well as being better at what I'm doing.
With his humble learning attitude, Ernie built his career through the firm friendships forged in warmth and sincerity. When Ernie first left Singapore for Australia, he came to earn a degree in medicine. Unexpectedly, Ernie succumbed to the seduction of Australia's fine wines and is returning to Singapore as a winemaker cum distributor that has put South Australia wines on the shelves of household names like Cold Storage.
I think wine is a good medicine.
This sweet medicine has made Australia a second home for Ernie. However, Ernie is convinced that despite the geographical distance, overseas Singaporeans can still make significant contributions to Singapore's development.
I think we should look at that as a positive thing, as Singaporeans venturing out to the rest of the world. By having these Singaporeans overseas, Singapore actually has a very globalized network of people, and they're a very good resource and pool of people that Singapore can tap into at any time, which I think in terms of be it trade or any other matters, they'll be very useful for Singapore.
The hustle and bustle of Singapore contrasts sharply with the slow, leisurely pace of life in Adelaide. But Ernie has no problems adjusting to the hectic pace here, as he returns at least once a month on business trips. Today, he makes a special trip to visit an old friend, Chin Liang, who also imports and exports wine. Sharing a common passion in wine, the two obviously have a common language.
I used to buy wines from him. Used to. Oh, you did. Which you're going to continue? Yes. we will continue buying wines from him. Yes.
Looks like Singaporeans will soon be able to savor Australian vintages, grown by one of our own. And what better way to toast to a delightful friendship and partnership than over a glass of wine produced in Ernie's own vineyard? Unlike the typical businessman, Ernie's appetite for trade is not born out of a desire for money. Quite the contrary, Ernie's like an unofficial trade ambassador, traveling between Australia and Singapore to promote a mutually benefiting export culture between the two countries.
The Australia-Singapore Business Council is basically a non-profit organization. What we do, we have sponsors that support us. We try to facilitate bilateral trade between Singapore and South Australia. By that I mean we try to increase the trade between the two countries, and we assist companies wanting from here going into Singapore and Singapore coming into South Australia. I feel that this is definitely my role in the Australia-Singapore Business Council. It's definitely my way of saying thank you to Singapore for what it has molded me and groomed me to be what I am today, and also to Australia for giving me what it has given me. So it is my way of giving back to society and to the two countries what they have given to me.
With acute business acumen, Ernie is making inroads with his export business with the help of his good friend George.
We export olive oils, foodstuffs, and also wines.
In addition to their wines, what started as requests from clients for wine-related products like olive oil and cheese soon became a growing business for Ernie and George. Often, Ernie meets with George to discuss strategies and plans. They are now supplying nuts and olive oil locally as well as exporting overseas.
It's going to Beijing for the oil exhibition in Beijing for olive oil. It's happening in April. So these are actually samples that we bring out for pouring, for tastings and all that. It's a bit similar to winemaking, where you pick your varieties and you pick the area where it's grown, because where it is grown will determine what flavors it has, and you blend these different regional olives together to give it the taste that you want.
The future never looked brighter as Ernie begins to diversify and expand his businesses with George. For Ernie, he feels the reason for his success is not so much shrewd marketing strategies, but a supporting and trusting friendship.
He has been one of the loyal clients, so he'll follow me wherever I go. The relationship says that, you see.
14 years into the wine business, and Ernie has formed a strong partnership with his new friends from down under.
Networking is still very important. Just like back home in Asia, I think networking and your contacts and integrating into the business culture and the business community is very important. So that aspect is still very much similar to what we know in Singapore and in Asia. Home for me right now, I think it's here in Adelaide. But you can. I guess you can never take the Singaporean out of me. I'm still one at heart, been brought up that way, and I guess I always will be one.
Foregoing his medical training to venture into winemaking, Ernie has made his passion into his business. Though it was tough learning about winemaking and distribution from scratch, Ernie grabbed every opportunity to learn through hands-on experience and persevered. And with hard work and a good dash of charisma, Ernie nurtures his partnerships with the same genuine care that he showers on his vines, taking his wine business from Australia to Singapore and beyond.